So thanks for everyone that viewed my last video. I really appreciate it. And thanks for tuning in to this one. So this video is just going to be another chit-chatty story time video. With me, I have my handy dandy strongbow, because you know me, getting drunk early in the afternoon. Kidding. So while we're on quarantine, I figured I might as well make as much content for all of you and fill you in on who I am and whatnot. Let's go way back. So some of you already know this. I grew up in Manila in the Philippines, and I later on immigrated here to Canada when I was 16. So I have two brothers. I have an older brother and a younger brother, and we all went to private Catholic school growing up. So if you can imagine, all boys school, uniforms, the whole shebang, very like boarding school-esque. So at a very young age, I was already super feminine, hyper feminine. I had a girl neighbor that my parents thought I had a crush on. I think I was like 3 or 4, but I would only really go over to her place to play with her dolls and her toys. The entire time, my parents thought I had a crush on her, which was so not true. Fast forward to first grade, and I'm in gym class with all the little boys, you know, and my gym teacher is this freaking fucking hot ass, buff, shaved head, daddy type. Oops. I'm filming.
Oh, well, thank you, princess.
Yeah.
You're drinking? Babe, that's not gonna make you feel better.
Sorry guys, my phone's going off. Let me just turn that on silent. Back to my story. So I was in first grade. I had a major crush on my gym teacher, and I was just like obsessed with him. He had like muscles and all these, like, he was jacked, and I was just like, this is weird. So during this period, I was obsessed with like Sailor Moon. I grew up watching Sailor Moon and anime. Playing video games, I always picked the girls. I loved playing video games with my brothers, especially fighting games. But I always picked, you know, female characters because I loved them. So this entire time, I think my parents kind of got wind, and also my brothers, that I was kind of different already. Feminine, effeminate, blah, blah, blah. So for a short period, my parents actually banned me from watching Sailor Moon and like other girly animes because they thought it was like influencing the way I acted and stuff. I was really sad. I used to cry so much because they banned me from watching Sailor Moon. Like, hello. Anyways, eventually I hit 4th grade, and for some odd reason, maybe I'm just stupid, but I assumed that I would grow into the body that I wanted. So for some weird reason, I assumed that I could choose that I would turn into like a sailor star. During homeroom, they were teaching us about puberty, and I remember the teacher talking about the male body and how our bodies were going to mature, into very masculine, hairy bodies. And I was so confused because I legit thought that I was gonna, you know, go and grow into like Sailor Mars or Sailor Mercury or something, and I was like shook. I was like, what the hell? Like, you're telling me I'm gonna grow into like a dude? When all I wanted was to go into this other avenue where I was like super girly and stuff. So that's when I knew I was different. That's when it like slapped me across the face, like, yo, you're so different, like you're clueless. And around this time, kids in my private school were already teasing me bakla, which in Filipino is gay. I was always called bakla, but my parents didn't really give us the talk about like gender, or didn't really explain or take the time to explain any of that. So everything that I learned just so happened to be in the school that I was enrolled in. So I didn't really know about other sexualities or whatnot until people started teasing me as gay. Lucky for me, I made friends with a bunch of other kids that were also being teased, gay as I was. Growing up, I would say I was partially bullied, but not fully. So people would make fun of me for being different and looking different and being super girly and effeminate, but also they were also nice to us for some weird reason. I don't know. So fast forward to grade 6 and 7. At this point, my youngest brother, was in school with me, and this is when things got a little bit harder because I did not want my younger brother to see that I was getting teased in school. I was very embarrassed that he had to be associated with me. Like, it really hurt me, and I didn't want any of my issues in school to blow back onto him. I didn't want him to get teased. I was very scared that he was gonna get teased as gay because I was gay. Anyways, in 7th grade, during a parent-teacher conference, my then teacher had mentioned something to my parents. He didn't out me per se, but he did mention to them that I had a feminine aura about me, that I was very effeminate. Automatically, my parents took that as a sign of like, my kid is gay. They were very into religion, and so once this came out after school, they tried to kind of pray the gay away. So they would drag me to church every single day after school. I was being dragged to church constantly to like atone for my sin, which is like to be being myself. And so this went on for around 2 years, 2.5 years. During this period, I had already fully come out as gay to my classmates in school, but I was in the closet to my parents. My brothers had an idea, I'm pretty sure, but I was so in the closet, I hid it from my parents. I hated my teenage years. I was so lost. I did not feel like I belonged anywhere. I hated school. I was failing my classes because it was starting to bother me. The only thing I really enjoyed in my teenage years was playing varsity volleyball. I made really good friends with the kids that I played volleyball with. Throughout this period, I also started messing around and fooling around with some of the boys in Catholic school. Funny enough, during this period, a lot of kids were like curious about, you know, sexuality. A lot of them were horny and like were starting to figure out things about their bodies. Yeah, this is around the time I started fooling around with other boys, the other jocks and stuff, and very surprising, but that happened. At the end of the day, I still hated my life. I hated everything about this period of my life. So my parents eventually decided that we were going to move to Canada. I was very excited to leave the Catholic high school that I was in. I was so done with religion. I was so done with every Catholic class that, you know, would tell me I was an abomination, that I would go to hell for everything that I was. I was so over it. Now, I did miss my friends. I was very sad to leave my friends, but at the end of the day, I saw it as a way to start completely fresh. So, in 2006, myself, my younger brother, and my mom went ahead to move to Vancouver. During this period, my dad and my eldest brother stayed behind in the Philippines. So I found a little bit more freedom being away from, you know, my dad and my eldest brother. For some odd reason, I felt like I was constantly disappointing my dad for being different, and we didn't really have a close connection to begin with growing up because he was very macho. He was like such a good dad in the sense that he provided for our family nonstop, but because he was such a provider, we didn't really have close of a bond. He was very close with my other two brothers, but because I was always so feminine and weird growing up, I think that kind of drove a wedge between us early on, which was very sad. Fast forward to me in Canada. I think around this time Mean Girls had just come out in the cinemas and helped me adapt to the public school system here in Canada because, again, it's co-ed. I had never been around other girls beforehand, so I was just like shell shocked. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just like Mean Girls. I remember the cafeteria and people's tables and the hierarchy and stuff. Lucky for me, I made really good friends in high school with a bunch of girls that took me in. That being said, during my time in high school, I had a little bit more freedom to be myself because there was no religion involved. I was able to relax more, which was great. And also, in that sense, I was able to explore who I was and my sexuality more. So fast forward to senior year. If you guys have seen Euphoria, where Jules, one of the trans characters, hooks up with someone older, I think in the first or second episode, my story relates to that so much. So when people think and ask if this shit on this TV show is real, shit's real, because I relate to it. I had already messed around prior to in terms of like oral stuff or, you know, blowjobs. But I was so curious as to what it's like. So this was the year Grindr came out. I heard it through my other friend who also was gay, and so I was like, fine, I'll join. I'm very curious as to what this is about. So I joined. I lied about my age. I had a profile, and of course a lot of older men took notice to my profile. So one weekend my mom and my younger brother were gone, and I had the place to myself. So I had a weekend planned with this much older gentleman who was in town for a conference, and he was married with 3 kids. He was like 46, 47, and at that time I was 18, I think I was 18 or 17, I don't know. And so I wanted to try it. I wanted to go the whole shebang. I wanted to try the entire thing. So this is so harsh and so bad, but yeah, I slept with a 47-year-old. Why? Maybe because I had daddy issues at that point. Maybe because acting out, lashing out, but also experiencing new things. I don't know. Trauma, you know, trauma. At the end of that weekend, he gave me a box of condoms, no joke, a box of condoms, and said thank you so much. And at that point I was like, what the hell did I just do? So I blocked him on Grindr, blah blah blah. Yeah, and so that was my first experience in terms of the whole thing. Shocking, I know. Probably the start of a lot of my daddy issues, sadly. Take a sip. So from then on, I graduated high school. I think I was 18, turning 19, so I started partying and going to clubs. Woo! At this point, I was going to gay clubs, but during one of my nightly excursions, I had run into a trans woman, and I don't think I had ever actually met a trans woman at that point. In the Philippines, with my upbringing, it was never discussed or talked about. The way I understood was that there were people that lived the opposite sex but were never seen equal as people or given the same opportunities. They were kind of always seen below what cisgender people were. So fast forward to this party portion of my life, this trans woman turns to me and stops me in the street and tells me like, hey, you're really beautiful, you're gorgeous, like, are you in transition? And at this point I was like, you know, I was a very effeminate boy with like wavy curly hair, so she assumed I was in transition, and I said, no, I don't know what you're talking about, I don't really understand. And then what she had told me kept coming into my brain and my head, and I eventually did research on what it was, and then everything just like clicked like a puzzle and a light bulb in my head. Holy crap, this entire time of me struggling with my sexuality and identity, I did not realize that there was this thing called being trans, and I think that's who I am. So once that clicked, I really suppressed the idea. I really suppressed it as much as I could, because I felt embarrassed and weird that I knew this information and I didn't really want to act on it. A little brief history throughout my high school years. I did struggle with an eating disorder, and the reason why this eating disorder developed was because I was obsessed with fashion models, high fashion models, and subliminally, because I played sports, I had gained so much muscle and I was getting really lean. And the best way I could kind of like battle that was starvation and not allowing my body to keep building mass. So over the course of like 5-6 years of doing this, I started getting really weak and sick, and people started to take notice. So during my first year of college, I went to community college for fashion one year. I eventually dropped out. I think during this period, I was really hating my body. I would extremely diet. I used to like count calories and jot it down in a notebook. If this is triggering, please skip this portion because I know it's very detailed and I don't want to trigger anyone. But I did a lot of bad things to lose weight and maintain a physique that was still very feminine. Fast forward to me dropping out of college. I dropped out because I was hating the program. On top of that, my mom was the only breadwinner between me and my younger brother here in Canada. My dad was still in the Philippines with my eldest brother, so I wanted to help her out with bills so that she didn't have such a hard time, you know, caring for me and my younger brother. So I quit school. I started working full-time. I think I was around 21 at this point, and I suppressed my desire to transition. So at this period, my dad had moved to Canada, which was lovely. I missed him a lot, but also our relationship was very stunted because of our move and the family splitting and not having a solid relationship to begin with. So my dad was a very successful geologist in the Philippines. So from being a vice president of an oil company in the Philippines, my dad came here and worked at Home Depot as a associate and cashier, and also worked a security guard job. So he wanted to provide for me and my mom and my brother so badly that he worked his ass off for like 1.5 years nonstop. He would get like 3 hours of sleep, sometimes 2 hours, and go from job to job. He really wanted to make up for being away all those years. He tried to like make it up by trying to provide so much that he got sick. He got so sick. So it was like the second holiday season of him being here. He got really ill after New Year's. So I woke up to him crying and like just hysterically panicking in the bathroom with my mom, and we had called an ambulance for him. He was bleeding out for some crazy reason, and so we called 911 on New Year's Day, and they took him in, and then he got diagnosed with liver cancer. I think a very late stage of liver cancer. Within 5 months he was in a hospice, and we were like still hoping for the best, but in reality we just did not realize how bad the situation was. He knew what was coming, so he tried to make amends with me. I remember one night he called me into his room at the hospice, and he was like crying, tears down his eyes, and he started apologizing to me. He told me like, "Son, I love you so much. I'm really proud of you." I was already wrestling with all these ideas of who I was, but I couldn't vocalize them, not even to my dad, who was very ill. He told me how much he loved me, which was very hard because between me, my brothers, and my dad, we had never expressed emotion up until that point. Eventually, he did pass away. I was 23 when this happened, and it took our family a long time to recover from this emotionally. There was a lot of blame tossed around, and yeah, it was hard to take in. So when he passed away, I really hated myself. I had so much grief that I didn't deal with properly, and the best way I could deal with it was by taking it out on my body. I was sexually promiscuous, and I used the app Grindr for that. For 2 years I fucked the shit out of my body because I just needed to feel something, and it was sad, it was dangerous. Yeah, I took it out of my body because I hated my body, I hated my shell. I was so confused. This is when I turned 24. This is when I realized, you know, I hit rock bottom. I hated myself, I hated my life. And it made me think about my dad, you know, how life is so short, and how he took the time to try to make up for, you know, time lost by working his ass off, and then in turn he got sick. And that made me realize about myself that life is so short. Do I really want to keep going, living a life that I don't recognize because I'm not happy with my shell? So I remember I was very depressed and suicidal, and I was contemplating suicide at this point because I couldn't handle the grief of losing my dad. I couldn't handle the grief of me continuing on hating my body and myself. So I made a list of pros and cons. So pros of committing suicide: it would end everything and I could be at peace. But cons to that was I was leaving behind my mom and my younger brother and my eldest brother and my family that had cared for me and given me an opportunity here in Canada. And that was super selfish, and that was just not a route I wanted to take. So the only other option was to transition. So on my list of transitioning pros, I was going to be myself. Finally, I could live as myself, not hating myself. Cons, of course, I made a list of that society was going to hate me. I was going to be a freak. I was never going to find love. No one's going to want to be my friend. No one's going to want to, you know, be my family member. But I just could not bring myself to harm myself, especially after seeing my dad pass. I could not do another selfish blow to my family. I couldn't leave my mom and my younger brother. So I decided to quietly look online, do more research, and find a doctor and a nurse that could see me and give me a professional opinion. I saw a nurse. I got my name on a wait list for hormones. I got approved, and I had to wait. I had to wait like 9 months to get my hormone replacement therapy. I was very patient. During this period, I had, you know, slowly grown my hair out. During this period, I had also met my now best friend, John, who has been such a rock and such a support for me in my life. And he actually didn't even know that I was transitioning when we first started hanging out. But eventually, when I did tell him, he was super supportive and super nice and kind about it, and super apologetic that he didn't realize that I was going through it. But how could he know? How could anyone know unless I said something, right? So the first people I ever told and asked about my transition were my two brothers, my older brother and my younger brother. I told them, like, hey, just so you know, I'm planning on transitioning. I've been depressed all this time, but I've realized this is what I need to do for myself. And my younger brother and my eldest brother just asked me if I was sure, if this is what I wanted, and will I be okay if I do this? And I said, yeah, I got this, guys. I really do. I know what to do. And I'm so grateful that my brothers were the first ones to accept me and say, yes, you should go do it. Because that gave me the strength to just like go full throttle. Eventually, that Christmas, I set out a Facebook, what's it called, status, telling them, guys, I would love for you to address me as female, as a she. This is my debut. So I essentially debuted myself during a Christmas party to my family, and they embraced me wholeheartedly. you know, my family's Filipino and Catholic, and you would assume that they would shun me for my choice, but no, it was opposite. They took me in for who I was, and it just goes to show that your religion shouldn't really fully dictate your choice in terms of love and accepting other people. And I'm so grateful that I have uncles and aunts and cousins that saw past all that and just love me for me. That's when I started my HRT, my hormones, and the rest is history. Here I am, guys, 5 years later, 2020, sharing my story with all of you. But I just wanted to share my personal journey to all of you. Hopefully, if you have a friend that is going through, you know, a confusing time, battling whether they want to transition or not, hopefully my story helps you guys. Yeah, that's all she wrote. If you have any questions for me in regards to anything with transitioning or how to go about it, just leave me a comment. You can always DM me on my social media platforms. Again, I want to send a massive thank you to everyone that accepts people who are different. I think in this day and age, it's very important that we stay open and keep our minds open and our hearts open, because we're all people. I hope you guys stay safe out there. I love all of you. Until the next video, take care.